Have you ever looked around your life and realized you have fewer friends than you did 20 years ago? And somehow, instead of feeling lonely, you felt strangely at peace. If that has happened to you, I want you to know something. It isn't an accident. In fact, it may be one of the healthiest signs that you are entering one of the happiest seasons of your life. Most people will tell you a shrinking circle is something to fear. I believe it's something often to celebrate. Today, I will show you why, and the final reason might completely change how you see every friendship you've ever had, the ones that lasted and the ones that didn't. Can I offer you a different question instead? What if nothing is wrong with you at all? What if your circle isn't shrinking because you're losing people, but because you're finally discovering who was ever really meant to stay? This is her golden chapter. And today, let's talk honestly about why your circle gets smaller after 60. And why it might be one of the most beautiful things that's ever happened to you. Reason 1, you stop performing for people. For most of our lives, so many of us were quietly trained to be easy, agreeable, low maintenance. Say yes even when everything in you wanted to say no. Smile through the discomfort. Keep the peace, even at your own expense. Maybe you've noticed that somewhere in your 50s or 60s, you got tired of performing that role. You started saying what you actually meant. You stopped over-explaining your choices. You stopped showing up to things out of guilt. And here's what happens next. Some friendships simply can't survive once you stop performing. The ones that needed you agreeable, needed you small, needed you to keep smoothing things over, those start to feel strained. Not because you became difficult, because you finally became honest. Have you ever noticed that the people who drift away first are usually the ones who needed the old version of you to stay? That's not rejection. That's clarity showing up right on time. But that wasn't the biggest change many women noticed. The biggest change came next. Reason 2. Peace becomes worth more than popularity. There's a particular kind of tiredness that comes from being liked by everyone. Managing a dozen relationships at once, remembering who's upset with whom, softening your opinions so nobody's feelings get bruised, showing up to things you dread because you're afraid of being left out. Perhaps you felt this too. The moment you realized a full calendar wasn't the same thing as a full heart. Popularity asks you to be everywhere, for everyone. Peace only asks you to be present for the people who are actually good for your soul. And somewhere along the way, many of us made a quiet trade we never announced out loud, trading the wide, noisy circle for a smaller, calmer one. What surprised most women even more was what filled the space that trade created. Evenings that felt restful instead of obligatory. Conversations that felt nourishing instead of draining. A phone that rings less, but when it does, it's someone you actually want to hear from. If this sounds familiar, I don't think it means you failed at friendship. I think it means you finally understood what friendship was supposed to feel like. Reason 3. Time quietly tells the truth. There's an old saying that time reveals people, and I believe that becomes especially true as we age. When we're young, friendships often form quickly through proximity, convenience, shared circumstance. Those friendships are real, but not all of them were built to last a lifetime. As the years pass, life has a way of testing every relationship without asking your permission. A health scare, a move, a loss, a season where you needed someone and found out gently or painfully who actually showed up. Maybe someone you thought would be there forever simply wasn't when it mattered most. And maybe someone you didn't expect much from turned out to be the one who sat quietly beside you in your hardest hour. That's what I mean when I say time tells the truth. It doesn't need your help. It doesn't need you to test anyone or push anyone away. It simply shows you, patiently, who was there for the friendship and who was only ever there for the convenience. By the time we reach our 60s and beyond, most of us aren't guessing anymore. We already know. And that knowing is exactly why the circle narrows. Not because good people left, but because the truth finally had time to surface. If these conversations remind you that your best years are still unfolding, I'd love for you to like this video, subscribe to her golden chapter, and turn on the notification bell so we can continue this journey together. It means more than you know to have you here. Now, Here's the part almost nobody talks about. Reason 4, your emotional energy finally feels precious. When we were younger, most of us had emotional energy to spare. We could stay up untangling someone else's chaos, absorb a friend's crisis without much cost, show up for every emergency, and still have enough left for our own lives. Have you noticed that this changes? Not because you care less, because you finally understand what your energy is actually worth. Many of us knew someone, maybe more than one someone, who was always in some kind of storm, always needing rescuing, always pulling us into the emergency of the week. And for years, we showed up because that's what good friends do. But somewhere along the way, something in you started to feel a heaviness before the phone even rang. A quiet dread. A depletion you didn't have words for yet. That feeling wasn't selfishness. It was your body telling you the truth before your mind caught up. Not every relationship deserves unlimited access to your heart. Protecting your energy isn't abandoning people. It's finally recognizing that you only have so many hours, so much patience, so much of yourself to give, and it deserves to go toward the people who give it back. What happened next changed everything for so many women. Once they stopped pouring into draining relationships, they finally had enough left over to notice who had been quietly replenishing them all along. Reason 5. History starts to matter more than common ground. When we're younger, friendships often form around what we share in the moment. The same job, the same gym class, kids the same age, the same street. Those connections matter. But as the years pass, something shifts. It stops being about who shares your interests and starts being about who shares your story. Maybe you have a friend from decades ago, someone you don't see often, who doesn't even live nearby anymore, someone you might not have much in common with today. But the moment you speak with her, no time has passed at all. She remembers who you were before you became who you are now. She was there for a version of you that most people in your life today never even met. That kind of connection can't be manufactured. It can't be rushed. It can only be built one decade at a time. This is part of why the circle narrows as we age. Not because we're less social, but because we finally understand that one friend who's walked 20 years beside you is worth more than 10 who only just arrived. Depth starts to matter more than width. Can I ask you something? Has your circle become smaller over the years or stronger? I'd genuinely love to hear your experience in the comments because your story may encourage another woman today. Reason 6. Solitude stops feeling like a punishment. The 6th reason is one most women never expect, because for most of our lives, we were taught that being alone meant something was wrong with us. That a quiet weekend meant we were failing at friendship, at life, at being enough. Have you noticed how differently solitude feels now compared to 20 years ago? There was a time when silence in the house felt heavy. Now, for so many women, it feels like relief. A cup of tea and a quiet morning. An afternoon with a book and no one needing anything from you. A walk where your only company is your own thoughts. And for the first time in a long while, that company feels like enough. This shift doesn't happen because we stopped valuing people. It happens because we finally stopped confusing being alone with being lonely. They were never the same thing, even though most of us spent decades fearing both equally. Chosen solitude becomes something closer to sacred. It's where you finally hear your own voice again, underneath all the roles you've played for everyone else. Reason 7. A smaller circle makes room for a bigger life. And the final truth may completely change the way you see everything we've talked about today. A smaller circle doesn't mean a smaller life. Often it means the opposite. When you're no longer spending your evenings managing friendships that drain you, attending gatherings out of obligation, or performing a version of yourself just to keep the peace with people who never truly saw you, something remarkable happens. All of that reclaimed time, reclaimed energy, reclaimed emotional space has to go somewhere. It goes into the garden you finally have time to tend. Into the grandchild who gets your full undistracted attention. Into the hobby you shelved decades ago and are only now returning to. Into the handful of relationships that finally get the fullness of who you really are. A smaller circle, chosen with intention, doesn't shrink your world. It clears space for your world to finally reflect who you truly are. What remains isn't emptiness. Maybe your circle isn't getting smaller because life is taking people away. Maybe life is gently removing everyone who was never meant to walk beside you forever. What remains isn't emptiness, it's clarity. It's peace. It's room for the people who truly see you. And perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts growing older has to offer. If today's conversation meant something to you, I'd love for you to subscribe to Her Golden Chapter and join us for next week's conversation. There's so much more of your golden chapter still waiting to be written, and I'd be honored to walk through it with you. Until next time, keep embracing your golden chapter.